The dust swirled across the main street of Abilene, Kansas, as Charlotte Sinclair pressed her tear-stained handkerchief to her face, the stagecoach beneath her rumbling as it prepared for its final departure of the day. Her shoulders shook with each sob, her golden brown hair falling in loose tendrils from what had once been an immaculate updo that morning. The year was 1871, and Charlotte's world had crumbled around her in less than 24 hours. Last call for the eastbound stage to Topeka. The driver shouted, his voice carrying over the evening bustle of Abilene. Charlotte gripped the seat beneath her, knuckles white, wondering if she was making the biggest mistake of her life by leaving. The other passengers, an elderly couple and a traveling salesman, averted their eyes, giving her the privacy her grief demanded. Her valise and 2 trunks were already secured on top, containing everything she had left in the world. As the driver climbed up to his seat, a commotion from the direction of the livery stable caught everyone's attention. A tall man was running toward the stage, dust kicking up around his boots. His hat was pushed back on his head, revealing a strong-jawed face bronzed by the sun and creased with determination. "Hold up there," he called, his voice deep and authoritative. Charlotte looked up, hastily wiping her eyes. Samuel Tanner. The cowboy who worked for her father who had worked for her father. She hadn't expected to see him again. Sam reached the stagecoach just as the driver was readying the reins. "Wait," he said, catching his breath. His eyes found Charlotte's, and something in his gaze made her breath catch. Without asking permission, he climbed aboard and sat on the bench opposite her. "What are you doing?" she whispered, conscious of the other passengers' curious stares. Sam leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Stay," he said simply. That single word hung between them like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. Charlotte blinked, fresh tears forming. "I have nothing left here," she replied, her voice breaking. "That's not true," Sam said, reaching out to touch her gloved hand. "You have the ranch. You have people who care about you." He paused. "You have me." The driver cleared his throat impatiently. "Are you boarding, mister, or are we leaving? Son's not getting any younger." Charlotte stared at Sam, seeing something in his eyes she'd never noticed before, or perhaps had never allowed herself to notice. The way he looked at her wasn't just with the respect of an employee for his boss's daughter, but with something deeper, something that made her heart race despite her grief. "I can't run the ranch alone," she whispered. "You won't have to," Sam replied firmly. Charlotte thought of her father's funeral that morning, of the banker who had approached her immediately after with talk of debts and foreclosure. She thought of the whispers around town that a woman couldn't manage such a spread on her own. She thought of the long, lonely journey back east to distant relatives who had never approved of her father's western adventures. "Miss," the driver called down, "we need to get moving. Is this gentleman staying or going?" Charlotte looked at Sam again, at his weathered face and honest eyes. At the man who had worked beside her father for 5 years, who knew every inch of the Sinclair Ranch, who had always been there, steady and reliable in the background. The man who had just offered her something no one else had, a choice. "The gentleman is staying," she said, her voice growing stronger. "And so am I." Sam's face broke into a relieved smile as he extended his hand to help her down from the coach. The driver grumbled but began unloading her trunks. The other passengers watched with varying degrees of interest as Charlotte stepped back onto the dusty street of Abilene, her decision made. As they stood on the boardwalk watching the stagecoach roll away, Charlotte felt a strange mixture of terror and exhilaration. "Sam, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing," she admitted. "Your father built that ranch from nothing," Sam replied. "He wouldn't want you to give up on it so easily." Charlotte nodded, thinking of her father's pride in what he'd created. The bank says we owe $3,000. The drought last summer hit us hard. I know, Sam said quietly. Your father confided in me about the finances. That's why I've been saving my wages. I have nearly $800 put away. It's a start. Charlotte stared at him in shock. You'd invest your savings in the ranch. In your father's dream, Sam corrected her. In your future. The sincerity in his voice brought fresh tears to her eyes, but these weren't tears of despair. For the first time since receiving news of her father's heart attack 2 days ago, Charlotte felt something akin to hope. We should get back before dark, Sam said, lifting her largest trunk effortlessly. Storms brewing to the west. As they walked toward the livery where Sam's horse and wagon waited, Charlotte noticed how people on the street nodded respectfully to him. Sam Tanner was well regarded in Abilene, quiet and hardworking, known for his fairness and skill with horses. I didn't think anyone would care if I left, Charlotte said softly as he loaded her trunks into the wagon. Sam paused, looking at her directly. I would have cared, he said simply, then turned back to securing the load. The ride back to the Sinclair Ranch was mostly silent. Charlotte watched the familiar landscape pass by, the rolling Kansas prairie stretching toward the horizon, dotted with the occasional homestead. Her father had chosen this land 15 years ago, when Abilene was little more than a dusty stop on the cattle trail. Now it was growing into a proper town, with the railroad bringing new opportunities and people each day. As the wagon crested the final hill, the Sinclair Ranch came into view in the valley below. The 2-story white farmhouse her father had built for her mother, who hadn't survived the journey west. The barn and corrals, the bunkhouse where Sam and the other 2 ranch hands lived, the workshop and storage sheds. It wasn't the largest spread in the county, but it was good land with a reliable creek running through it. It looks different somehow, Charlotte murmured. How so? Sam asked, glancing at her. Like it's waiting to see what I'll do next. Sam guided the horses into the yard as the first heavy drops of rain began to fall. Mrs. Fletcher, the housekeeper who had raised Charlotte after her mother's death, came bustling out onto the porch. Thank the Lord, the older woman exclaimed. I was praying you'd change your mind about leaving, Miss Charlotte. Sam convinced me to stay, Charlotte replied, allowing him to help her down from the wagon. Mrs. Fletcher's knowing look between them made Charlotte blush, though she couldn't say exactly why. Sam had always been part of the ranch's background, respected, reliable, but somehow invisible to her until today. I'll get your trunks inside before this rain picks up, Sam said, already moving to the back of the wagon. Charlotte hurried up to the porch as the sky opened up. From there, she watched Sam working efficiently in the downpour, refusing Mrs. Fletcher's suggestion to wait until the storm passed. By the time he brought the last trunk in, he was soaked to the skin, his shirt clinging to broad shoulders she'd never properly noticed before. You'll catch your death, Mrs. Fletcher chided, bustling off to fetch towels. It's just water, Sam said with a small smile, pushing his wet hair back from his forehead. I should check on the horses and let Diego and Hank know you're staying. They've been worried. Sam, Charlotte said, stopping him as he turned to leave. Thank you. Not just for today, but for everything you did for my father. He always spoke highly of you. Something flickered in Sam's eyes. Your father was a good man. He gave me a chance when others wouldn't. He hesitated. We'll talk tomorrow about the ranch. Get some rest, Charlotte. It was the first time he had ever used her given name instead of Miss Sinclair, and the sound of it in his deep voice made something flutter in her chest. As she watched him disappear into the rain, Charlotte realized that Samuel Tanner might be the key to saving her father's legacy and perhaps much more. The morning after the storm broke clear and fresh, the prairie washed clean by the night's heavy rain. Charlotte rose early, dressed in her simplest work dress and pinned her hair in a practical bun. She had spent a restless night thinking about the ranch, about Sam's offer of help, and about the strange new awareness she felt in his presence. Mrs. Fletcher was already in the kitchen, frying bacon and mixing biscuit dough. "Good morning, dear. There's coffee on the stove." "Has Sam been by yet?" Charlotte asked, pouring herself a cup. "Not yet, but Diego came to say they've fixed that section of fence that went down in the storm." That Sam was up before dawn seeing to it. Mrs. Fletcher gave her a sidelong glance. "He's a good man, that one." Charlotte busied herself with her coffee to hide her reaction. "Yes, he's been very loyal to the ranch. To your father and now to you," Mrs. Fletcher corrected gently. Not many cowboys would turn down a cattle drive to stay and help. She hesitated. "A helpless woman," Charlotte finished for her, a note of bitterness in her voice. "I was going to say a new ranch owner," Mrs. Fletcher replied, "but you're far from helpless, Charlotte Sinclair. Your father made sure of that." It was true. Unlike many girls of her station, Charlotte had been raised learning the business of ranching alongside her more ladylike accomplishments. Her father had insisted she know how to ride, shoot, and understand the financial aspects of the ranch. "A woman alone needs to be twice as capable," he'd often told her. "I need to see the account books," Charlotte decided, "and then I want to ride out and see the herd." Mrs. Fletcher nodded approvingly. "That's the spirit. Your breakfast will be ready in 10 minutes. Charlotte was in her father's study reviewing the ledgers when Sam knocked on the open door. He'd clearly cleaned up since his early morning fence mending, his dark hair still damp from washing, his blue cotton shirt fresh. "May I come in?" he asked, hat in hand. "Of course." Charlotte gestured to the chair across from the desk. "I was just looking over the accounts." Sam sat down, placing his hat on his knee. "How bad is it?" Charlotte appreciated his directness. "Not as dire as the banker made it sound yesterday, but still serious. We owe payments on the new breeding stock father purchased last fall, plus the regular bank note." She tapped the ledger. "If we can sell 30 head at good prices next month at the cattle auction in Topeka, we'll be halfway there." "The herd's looking strong," Sam said. "And beef prices are up since the new railroad spur opened. But we'd get better prices if we could hold off selling until winter." Charlotte noted his use of "we" with a small smile. "Unfortunately, the bank won't wait that long. Mr. Jenkins made that very clear at the funeral." She couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "Jenkins is a vulture," Sam said flatly. "He's been trying to get this land for years. There are rumors he's working with the railroad on a new line that would cut right through the eastern pasture." "That explains his eagerness to foreclose," Charlotte said, frowning. "But it doesn't change our situation." Sam leaned forward. "What if we could get an extension? The Cattlemen's Association sometimes provides short-term loans to members. Your father was well respected among them." "But I'm not my father," Charlotte pointed out. "I'm a 22-year-old woman. They're unlikely to extend the same courtesy to me." "Not if you go alone," Sam acknowledged. "But if I went with you as your ranch foreman." He left the suggestion hanging. Charlotte considered him. "Are you proposing a promotion for yourself, Mr. Tanner?" A smile touched the corner of his mouth. "I'm proposing a partnership of sorts. You need someone the other ranchers will listen to, and I need—" He stopped. "What do you need, Sam?" Charlotte asked softly. His blue eyes held hers steadily. "A purpose. A place where my work matters." Something unspoken passed between them, a current of understanding that went beyond employer and employee. Charlotte felt her cheeks warm under his gaze. "Very well," she said, trying to sound businesslike. "You're now the foreman of Sinclair Ranch, with a corresponding increase in salary once we're solvent again. Sam's face broke into a rare, full smile that transformed his usually serious features. That's fair. Shall we ride out to check the herd? I want to show you the new calves. An hour later, Charlotte was on horseback beside Sam, riding through the western pasture where the main herd grazed. She'd changed into split riding skirts that had scandalized the town when her father first ordered them from back east, but were far more practical than attempting to ride side saddle over rough terrain. "We've had 12 new calves in the past week," Sam was saying. "All healthy. That red spotted heifer over there dropped twins yesterday, both bulls." Charlotte watched him as he spoke about the cattle. His knowledge was comprehensive, his passion for the work evident. She wondered why he'd never struck out on his own, why he'd remained a hired hand on her father's ranch for so long. "Why didn't my father make you foreman years ago?" she asked suddenly. Sam glanced at her in surprise. "He offered more than once. I turned him down." "Why?" He was silent for a moment, his eyes on the horizon. "I wasn't ready for the responsibility, or maybe I was waiting for something, though I couldn't have told you what." He looked back at her. "Things change, people change." There was something in his voice that made Charlotte's heart beat faster. Before she could respond, a shout from across the pasture caught their attention. Diego, one of the ranch hands, was galloping toward them. "Riders coming," he called as he approached. 5 men, including Jenkins from the bank. Sam's face hardened. "Earlier than expected." "They're probably coming to pressure you to sell." Charlotte straightened her spine. "Then they'll be disappointed. Let's head back to the house." By the time they reached the ranch yard, the visitors were already dismounting. William Jenkins, the banker, was accompanied by 4 men Charlotte didn't recognize, all expensively dressed in Eastern-style suits despite the dust of travel. "Miss Sinclair," Jenkins called with artificial cheer. "I've brought some gentlemen eager to discuss your situation." Charlotte remained on her horse, deliberately making them look up at her. "I wasn't aware we had an appointment, Mr. Jenkins." "These gentlemen are from the railroad," Jenkins continued, undeterred. "They've made a very generous offer for your property, enough to clear your debts and provide for your future." "The ranch isn't for sale," Charlotte replied firmly. She was acutely aware of Sam beside her, his presence somehow bolstering her confidence. "Perhaps you should hear the offer before dismissing it," one of the railroad men said, stepping forward. "We're prepared to pay 3 times what this land is worth under normal circumstances." "Which only confirms its actual value is even higher," Sam interjected, his voice calm but carrying an edge. "The lady said the ranch isn't for sale." Jenkins frowned at Sam. "This is a business discussion between Miss Sinclair and potential buyers. Ranch hands should know their place." "Mr. Tanner is my foreman," Charlotte corrected, enjoying the flash of surprise on Jenkins' face. "And he speaks with my authority in all ranch matters." The railroad man looked between them, reassessing. "Miss Sinclair, we understand your attachment to your father's property, but surely you must see that a woman alone can't possibly manage a working ranch. We're offering you a dignified solution." Charlotte felt anger rising in her chest. "My father built this ranch when Abilene was nothing but a whistle stop. He believed in its future, and so do I. I'm not alone, and I'm not selling." "Good day, gentlemen." She turned her horse, prepared to ride away, but Jenkins called after her. "Your banknote comes due in 30 days, Miss Sinclair. When you can't pay, you'll wish you'd taken this offer." Charlotte kept riding, though her hands trembled on the reins. Sam caught up to her as they reached the barn. "That was well done," he said quietly as they dismounted. "They'll be back," Charlotte replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Yes, they will." Sam took her horse's reins along with his own. "But we'll be ready. He hesitated. "Charlotte, there's something I need to tell you." The seriousness in his tone made her look up sharply. "What is it?" "Your father and I were working on a plan before he died. He knew the railroad was coming, knew they'd try to force him out." Sam led the horses into the barn, continuing to speak as Charlotte followed. "We found something on the North Ridge that changes everything." "What are you talking about?" Charlotte asked, confused. "Coal," Sam said simply, turning to face her. "A significant deposit. Your father discovered it when that section of the ridge collapsed after the spring floods. He swore me to secrecy until he could file the proper claims." Charlotte stared at him in shock. "Coal?" "On Sinclair land. We were going to Kansas City to register the claim next month." Sam's face darkened. "I think Jenkins found out somehow. It explains why they're so desperate to get the land now, before the claim is filed and the value skyrockets." Charlotte felt dizzy with this new information. "If there's coal on the property, then the railroad will have to negotiate fair terms for access, not try to steal it through foreclosure," Sam finished. "But we need to file that claim before the banknote comes due." "Kansas City is 3 days' journey each way," Charlotte calculated quickly. "And someone needs to stay here to make sure Jenkins and his railroad friends don't try anything while I'm gone." "I'll go," Sam offered immediately. "Your father showed me exactly where the deposit is and what paperwork needs filing." Charlotte shook her head. "No. If what you say is true, this changes everything about the ranch's future. I need to see it for myself, understand what we're dealing with." She met his eyes firmly. "We'll go together. Diego and Hank can watch the ranch with Mrs. Fletcher. We'll leave tomorrow at first light." Sam studied her face, seeming to weigh her determination. Finally, he nodded. "Together, then." As they stood in the dim light of the barn, horses nickering softly in their stalls, Charlotte felt a strange new certainty settling over her. Yesterday, she had been leaving Abilene forever, fleeing from her responsibilities and grief. Today, she was fighting for her father's legacy and perhaps building something new alongside this man who had stepped forward when she needed him most. "Sam," she said softly, "why did you stop me from leaving yesterday? The truth." He held her gaze steadily. "Because I made a promise to your father to look after you if anything happened to him." He paused. "And because I couldn't bear to see you go." The simple honesty in his words touched something deep inside her. Before she could respond, Diego called from outside, asking about feeding the new calves, and the moment was broken. But as they went about the rest of the day's work, something had shifted between them, something neither was quite ready to name. Dawn broke misty and cool over the Sinclair Ranch as Charlotte secured the last of their provisions in her saddlebags. They were traveling light for speed, just essentials for the journey to Kansas City and back. Mrs. Fletcher fussed around her, insisting she take extra cornbread and dried apple slices. "You'll need your strength," the housekeeper said, pressing the wrapped package into Charlotte's hands. "The road to Kansas City isn't what it once was, with all manner of rough characters since they started building that new railroad spur." "We'll be fine," Charlotte assured her. "Sam's bringing his rifle and I have father's pistol." Mrs. Fletcher glanced toward the barn where Sam was preparing their horses. "That man would walk through fire for you," she said quietly. "Always has, even when you didn't notice." Charlotte felt her cheeks warm. "What do you mean?" The older woman smiled knowingly. "I've watched him watching you for years. The way he straightens up when you enter a room, how he always positions himself where he can see you." "He was father's most trusted hand," Charlotte protested weakly. "Of course he was protective." "It's more than that," Mrs. Fletcher insisted. "But you're only now seeing it because you're finally looking." She patted Charlotte's arm. "Just be careful with his heart, dear. Men like Sam Tanner don't give it easily, but when they do, it's complete. Before Charlotte could formulate a response, Sam approached, leading both their horses. "We should get moving if we want to make Salina by nightfall," he said. Charlotte nodded, grateful for the interruption, though Mrs. Fletcher's words echoed in her mind as they mounted up and rode out. Had Sam truly harbored feelings for her all this time? And more troublingly, why had she never noticed him as anything more than her father's reliable employee, until now? They rode steadily through the morning, following the main road east before turning north toward Salina. Sam proved a comfortable traveling companion, neither too talkative nor too silent. He pointed out landmarks and shared stories about the land they passed, revealing a depth of knowledge about the territory that surprised her. "How did you come to know Kansas so well?" she asked as they paused to rest the horses near a small creek around midday. Sam took a drink from his canteen before answering. "I drove cattle through most of it before coming to work for your father. Before that, I was with the Union Army during the war, stationed at Fort Riley for a time." Charlotte realized how little she actually knew about him, despite his years at the ranch. "You fought in the war. You couldn't have been very old." 18 when I enlisted in 63, he said, his expression growing distant. "Old enough to know what I was fighting for, young enough to believe in it completely." "And now," she asked softly, his blue eyes met hers, "now I believe in more immediate things. Good land, honest work," he paused, "people worth protecting." There was something in his gaze that made Charlotte look away first, suddenly aware of how alone they were on the open prairie. She busied herself with checking her horse's saddle. "We should keep moving if we want to reach Salina before dark." They rode on, the sun climbing high and then beginning its slow descent westward. Charlotte found herself studying Sam's profile when he wasn't looking, the strong line of his jaw, the way the sun had etched fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the capable hands that held the reins so confidently. When had Samuel Tanner become more than just a fixture at her father's ranch? Had it been yesterday, when he climbed aboard that stagecoach and said that single word that changed everything? Or had it been building quietly over years of daily interactions she had taken for granted? As the afternoon wore on, clouds began gathering on the western horizon, building into towering thunderheads. Sam watched them with concern. "We might need to find shelter before Salina," he said. "That storm's moving faster than I'd like." Charlotte followed his gaze. "How far to the next town?" "Junction City's about 5 miles ahead. We should be able to make it before the storm hits." They urged their horses to a faster pace, but the storm rolled in with surprising speed. The first fat drops of rain hit them when Junction City was just coming into view, and within minutes, they were riding through a downpour. By the time they reached the town's main street, they were both soaked to the skin. Sam spotted a hotel and guided them toward it. They dismounted quickly, and he took both horses' reins. "Get inside," he told Charlotte. "I'll see to the horses and join you." Charlotte didn't argue, hurrying up the hotel steps as lightning cracked overhead. Inside, she dripped on the worn carpet as the hotel clerk looked her up and down with raised eyebrows. "Caught in the storm, madam?" he asked unnecessarily. "Yes. My." Charlotte hesitated, suddenly realizing how it would look an unmarried woman traveling alone with a man. "My husband is seeing to our horses. We'll need a room for the night." If the clerk found anything suspicious about her hesitation, he didn't comment. He pushed the register toward her. "Sign here, Mrs. Tanner," Charlotte said, the false name feeling strange on her tongue. "Mr. and Mrs. Samuel Tanner." She signed the register with a slightly shaking hand, hoping Sam would understand the necessity of the deception when he arrived. The clerk handed her a key. "Room 3, top of the stairs." Dining rooms closed for the night, but there's a cafe down the street still serving if you're hungry." Charlotte thanked him and made her way upstairs, leaving a trail of water behind her. The room was small but clean, with a single double bed, a washstand, and a small table with 2 chairs. The implications of the sleeping arrangements hit her all at once, and she felt her face flush despite her chilled state. She was still standing in the middle of the room, dripping and uncertain, when a knock came at the door 10 minutes later. She opened it to find Sam, just as soaked as she was, carrying their saddlebags. "Horses are settled at the livery," he said as he entered, then stopped short when he saw the single bed. His eyes met hers, questioning. "I had to say we were married," Charlotte explained quickly. "It was the only proper way to explain, I understand," Sam interrupted, sparing her further embarrassment. "It was quick thinking." An awkward silence fell between them. Finally, Sam cleared his throat. "You should change into something dry. I'll wait in the hallway." "Don't be ridiculous," Charlotte said with more confidence than she felt. "Turn your back. I'll change quickly and do the same for you." Sam nodded, setting down their bags and turning to face the wall. Charlotte hurried to find her spare clothes, fumbling with cold fingers at the buttons of her sodden dress. She changed as quickly as propriety would allow, donning her nightgown and wrapping a shawl around her shoulders for modesty. "You can turn around now," she said, her back now to him. "I'm decent." She heard him moving behind her, the rustle of fabric as he changed his own wet clothes. The awareness of his presence, of his state of undress, made her cheeks burn despite the room's chill. "All done," he said after a few minutes. Charlotte turned to find him in a dry shirt and trousers, his hair still damp and slightly tousled. Something about seeing him this way, less formal than usual, in the intimate confines of a hotel room, made her heart beat faster. "I'll sleep on the floor," he said immediately, already gathering an extra blanket from the bed. "You'll catch your death after being soaked through," Charlotte protested. "The bed is large enough for both of us." Sam's eyes widened slightly. "Charlotte, that wouldn't be proper, even with the pretense of marriage." "Nothing about this situation is proper," she pointed out pragmatically. "But we're both adults and we have a long journey ahead. Neither of us will be any good to the ranch if we fall ill from sleeping on cold, hard floors." She could see him weighing propriety against practicality. Finally, he nodded. "If you're sure." "I am," she said with more conviction than she felt. "Now, shall we find that cafe the clerk mentioned? I'm starving." The rain had slackened to a steady drizzle by the time they ventured out in search of food. The cafe was nearly empty, just a few locals lingering over coffee. Charlotte was acutely aware of how the proprietress assumed they were a married couple, seating them at a small table in the corner and referring to her as Mrs. Tanner. "You're handling the deception well," Sam commented quietly after they'd ordered. Charlotte smiled slightly. "Father always said I had a talent for adapting to circumstances." "He was proud of you," Sam said. "He told me once that you had more grit than most men he knew." "Did he speak of me often?" Charlotte asked, curious about these conversations she'd never been privy to. A smile touched Sam's lips. "Often enough. He worried about your future, about leaving you alone eventually." His expression grew more serious. "That's why he was so determined to secure the ranch's prosperity for you." Their food arrived, momentarily halting the conversation. As they ate, Charlotte found herself studying Sam's hands, strong, capable hands that had built fences, broken horses, and now were handling a fork and knife with surprising gentleness. "How did you come to work for my father?" she asked suddenly. "You've been at the ranch for 5 years, but I realize I never knew the story." Sam considered the question. "I was passing through Abilene with a cattle drive, had a disagreement with the trail boss about how he was treating a young hand. Things got heated. Your father happened to witness it." He smiled at the memory. "He offered me a job on the spot, said he needed men who stood up for what was right, even when it cost them." "That sounds like father," Charlotte said softly. "He gave me a chance when I needed one," Sam continued. "After the war, I was drifting, not sure where I belonged anymore. The Sinclair Ranch became home." His eyes met hers across the table. "Still is." Something in his gaze made Charlotte's breath catch. In that moment, with rain pattering against the windows and the soft glow of lamplight between them, Samuel Tanner wasn't just her father's trusted hand, or even her newly appointed foreman. He was a man, one whose quiet strength and unwavering loyalty had become suddenly, overwhelmingly attractive to her. The walk back to the hotel was silent, both of them lost in their own thoughts. The awkwardness returned full force when they re-entered their room and faced the shared bed. By unspoken agreement, they settled on opposite sides, a respectable distance between them, both still fully clothed apart from boots and outer layers. "Good night, Charlotte," Sam said quietly as he extinguished the lamp. "Good night, Sam," she replied, lying rigid in the darkness, acutely aware of his presence mere inches away. Despite her exhaustion from the day's journey, sleep eluded Charlotte. She lay awake, listening to the steady rhythm of Sam's breathing, wondering if he was equally sleepless. The storm continued outside, occasional flashes of lightning illuminating the room briefly before plunging it back into darkness. During one such flash, she turned her head and found Sam watching her, his blue eyes reflecting the momentary light. Neither spoke, but something passed between them in that instant, an acknowledgement of this new awareness that had sprung up between them, fragile yet insistent. When Charlotte finally drifted into sleep, it was with the comforting knowledge of Sam's presence beside her, steady and protective even in unconsciousness. For the first time since her father's death, she didn't feel alone. The journey to Kansas City took 3 more days, each one bringing a subtle shift in Charlotte and Sam's relationship. The initial awkwardness of their first night gave way to a growing ease with each other's company. They talked of the ranch, of Charlotte's childhood memories, of Sam's experiences during the war. In the evenings, they would sit by campfires or in small-town hotels, planning the future of the Sinclair Ranch with a shared vision that felt increasingly natural. By the time they reached Kansas City, Charlotte found herself stealing glances at Sam when he wasn't looking, noticing details she'd somehow missed for years, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the careful precision with which he tended the horses, the low rumble of his laugh on the rare occasions she coaxed it from him. Kansas City was a bustling metropolis compared to Abilene, with brick buildings rising multiple stories and streets crowded with wagons, carriages, and pedestrians. Charlotte felt overwhelmed by the noise and activity, but Sam navigated the chaos with confidence, leading them directly to the land office. "Mr. Walter Graham," Sam said to the clerk at the front desk. "He's expecting us." They were shown into a small office where a bespectacled man in his 50s rose to greet them. "Mr. Tanner, I presume? John Sinclair's man." "Yes, sir," Sam confirmed, shaking the offered hand. "And this is Miss Charlotte Sinclair, John's daughter and the current owner of Sinclair Ranch." Graham's eyebrows rose slightly as he turned to Charlotte. "Miss Sinclair, my condolences on your father's passing. He and I corresponded about the matter at hand, though I wasn't aware he had departed." "Thank you, Mr. Graham," Charlotte replied, extending her hand with all the confidence she could muster. "I understand my father consulted you about registering a mineral claim on our property." "Indeed." Graham gestured for them to sit. "He sent samples that proved most promising." I've prepared the necessary paperwork based on the survey information he provided. For the next hour, Charlotte listened as Graham explained the legal process of registering their claim, the rights it would grant them, and the potential value of the coal deposit. Sam occasionally interjected with questions that revealed his thorough understanding of the matter clearly. Her father had kept him well informed. Once these documents are filed, Graham concluded, you'll have exclusive mineral rights to the deposit. Any railroad or other entity wishing to extract the coal will need to negotiate terms with you directly. And the timeline? Charlotte asked. How quickly will the claim be officially recognized? The registration becomes effective immediately upon filing, Graham assured her. I can have these documents submitted by end of day. You should return tomorrow morning to collect the certified copies for your records. Charlotte signed where indicated, her hand steady despite the magnitude of what she was doing. This was the future of the Sinclair Ranch she was securing not just as a cattle operation, but as a potentially valuable mining property. As they left the land office, Charlotte felt a weight lift from her shoulders. We did it, she said softly to Sam as they walked back toward their hotel. You did it, he corrected. Your father would be proud. Charlotte impulsively caught his hand, squeezing it in gratitude. We did it together, Sam. I couldn't have done this without you. He looked down at their joined hands, then up at her face, something warm and unguarded in his expression. For a moment, Charlotte thought he might say more, but instead he simply returned the pressure of her fingers before gently releasing her hand. That evening, they celebrated with dinner at the hotel's restaurant, splurging on a bottle of wine that Charlotte insisted on despite Sam's protests about the expense. We're securing the ranch's future, she said, raising her glass in a toast. That deserves a proper celebration. Sam smiled, touching his glass to hers. To the future of Sinclair Ranch. And to partnerships, Charlotte added softly, holding his gaze. As the wine loosened their reserve, their conversation flowed more freely than ever before. Charlotte found herself laughing at Sam's dry observations about city life, while he listened intently to her dreams for expanding the ranch operations. I've been thinking, she said as they lingered over dessert. Once the bank note is paid, we should diversify. Not just cattle, but perhaps horses too. You have a gift with them. Breeding stock is expensive, Sam pointed out. Though with the coal money it might be feasible. I was thinking more of a partnership arrangement, Charlotte said carefully. You'd oversee that side of the business, with a percentage of profits rather than just a foreman's salary. Sam studied her across the table. That's a generous offer. It's a practical one, Charlotte replied. You've proven your value to the ranch many times over. I'd be a fool not to recognize it. Something shifted in Sam's expression. Is that all it is? Practicality? The question hung between them, loaded with implications. Charlotte felt her heart quicken as she met his steady gaze. No, she admitted quietly. It's not just that. Sam reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. Charlotte. But whatever he might have said was interrupted by the waiter arriving to clear their plates. The moment broken, they returned to safer topics for the remainder of the evening. Back in their hotel room, however, the unspoken tension remained. As on previous nights, they prepared for sleep with careful politeness, maintaining the pretense that sharing a room and a bed was merely a practical arrangement between business associates. Yet as Charlotte lay in the darkness, listening to Sam's breathing beside her, she found herself acutely aware of the narrowing emotional distance between them, even as they maintained a physical one. Whatever was growing between them seemed both inevitable and terrifying. Sam. She whispered, uncertain if he was still awake. Yes. His voice came immediately, confirming he too had been lying awake. Charlotte hesitated, then asked the question that had been troubling her. What happens when we return to the ranch, when we're no longer Mr. and Mrs. Tanner on the road, but Miss Sinclair and her foreman again? In the darkness, she felt him shift to face her. Is that what you want, to go back to how things were? I don't know if that's possible, she admitted. Everything feels different now. It is different, Sam said softly. Or at least, I hope it is. Charlotte turned toward him, though she could barely make out his features in the dim light filtering through the curtains. What do you mean? She felt rather than saw him move closer, his hand finding hers atop the blanket. I've respected you from a distance for years, Charlotte. First as my employer's daughter, then as a woman of remarkable strength and character. But these past days, traveling together, planning together, it's changed how I see our future. Our future, Charlotte echoed, her heart racing at the implication. Not just the ranch's future. They're intertwined for me, Sam confessed. They have been for longer than I've admitted, even to myself. Charlotte's breath caught. Mrs. Fletcher's words from days ago echoed in her mind. I've watched him watching you for years. Had Sam harbored feelings for her all this time, keeping them hidden behind a veil of professional respect? Why didn't you ever say anything? She whispered. His fingers tightened slightly around hers. It wasn't my place. Your father trusted me with his ranch, with your safety. I wouldn't betray that trust by presuming. And now circumstances have changed. You've changed. His voice grew more certain. You're no longer just John Sinclair's daughter to me, Charlotte. You're a partner, a woman I admire more with each passing day. In the darkness, Charlotte felt tears prick her eyes at the simple sincerity in his words. No one had ever spoken to her with such genuine respect mingled with tenderness. I've been blind, she said softly. You were there all along, and I never truly saw you until that moment on the stagecoach. You had no reason to see me as anything but your father's employee, Sam replied. I understood that. But now, Charlotte asked, echoing his earlier words. She felt him move closer still, his breath warm against her cheek. Now I hope you might see me as a man who cares for you deeply, who would stand beside you, not just as your foreman, but as your partner in all things if you wanted that. Charlotte's heart seemed to stop, then race forward. In that moment, the proper response would have been to ask for time, to suggest they discuss this when they returned to Abilene, to maintain the decorum her upbringing demanded. Instead, she closed the remaining distance between them and pressed her lips to his. Sam froze for the briefest moment in surprise, then responded with a gentleness that made her heart ache. His hand released hers to cup her cheek, his touch reverent as their kiss deepened from tentative exploration to something more certain. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Sam rested his forehead against hers. I've imagined that more times than I should admit, he murmured. Charlotte smiled in the darkness. I wish I could say the same, but I'd be lying. I never imagined this between us until recently. And now? He asked, echoing their earlier exchange. Now I can't imagine anything else, she admitted, surprised by the truth of it. In the span of a week, Samuel Tanner had transformed from her father's reliable hand to the center of her thoughts, the man whose steady presence made her feel both protected and empowered. Sam brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle. When we return to the ranch, nothing needs to be decided immediately. We have time to— I don't need time, Charlotte interrupted, surprising herself with her certainty. The ranch needs both of us, Sam. I need you, not just as my foreman, but as my partner, your husband. He suggested softly, the word hanging between them like a promise. Yes, she whispered, the rightness of it settling in her heart. If that's what you want to. In answer, Sam kissed her again, this time with a passionate certainty that left no doubt about his feelings. When they separated, he held her close, her head resting on his chest where she could hear the steady beating of his heart. "We should sleep," he said eventually, though his arms remained around her. "We have a long journey back to Abilene tomorrow." "And a future to build when we get there," Charlotte added, settling against him with a contentment she had not felt since before her father's death. As she drifted toward sleep, Charlotte thought of how drastically her life had changed in a week. From grief-stricken daughter fleeing her responsibilities on the last stagecoach out of Abilene, to confident ranch owner with a mineral claim and a future brighter than she could have imagined. All because Samuel Tanner had climbed aboard that stagecoach and said one simple word: "Stay." The return journey to Abilene seemed to pass in half the time, despite taking the same 4 days on horseback. Charlotte and Sam rode side by side, their conversations flowing easily between practical ranch matters and more personal revelations. Each night, they shared not just a room but embraces and whispered plans for the future, their growing affection no longer constrained by uncertainty or professional boundaries. As they crested the final hill overlooking Sinclair Ranch on the 4th day, Charlotte reined her horse to a stop, taking in the familiar sight with new eyes. "It looks different again," she observed. Sam halted beside her. "How so?" "Before, it looked like a burden I had to bear alone," Charlotte explained. "Now it looks like a future we're building together." Sam reached across the space between their horses to take her hand. "That's exactly what it is." Their arrival at the ranch brought an excited flurry of activity. Mrs. Fletcher rushed out to greet them, followed by Diego and Hank, all eager for news of their journey. Charlotte let Sam explain their success in filing the mineral claim while she dismounted and stretched her tired muscles. "The bank won't be able to push us around now," Sam concluded. "Once word gets out about the coal deposit, Jenkins will have to back off." "Speaking of Jenkins," Diego said, his expression darkening. "He came by with those railroad men again yesterday. Said if you weren't back by the end of the week, he'd start foreclosure proceedings early." Charlotte exchanged a look with Sam. "Then we returned just in time." "There's more," Mrs. Fletcher added, lowering her voice. "They were asking questions in town about the North Ridge, where exactly it was located, whether anyone had been surveying there recently." "They suspect something," Sam said grimly. "We need to move quickly to secure our position." Charlotte nodded, her mind already racing with plans. "First thing tomorrow, we'll ride into Abilene and meet with Jenkins. Show him the certified claim documents and make it clear that any attempt at foreclosure will be met with legal action." "I'll go with you," Sam said immediately. "No," Charlotte's voice was firm. "I need you to ride to the North Ridge with Diego. Check that everything is secure there. Make sure there's no evidence of trespassing or unauthorized surveying." Sam looked like he might protest, but after a moment's consideration he nodded. "You're right. The deposit needs to be protected." Charlotte turned to Mrs. Fletcher. "Is there still stew from yesterday?" "We're famished after the ride." "Of course, dear. I'll heat it right up." The housekeeper paused, looking between Charlotte and Sam with knowing eyes. "And will Mr. Tanner be joining us for dinner in the house tonight, rather than eating in the bunkhouse?" Charlotte felt a blush rise to her cheeks but met the older woman's gaze steadily. "Yes, he will. In fact, Mrs. Fletcher, Mr. Tanner and I have some news to share with you all over dinner." The housekeeper's face broke into a wide smile. "It's about time," she said simply, before bustling back toward the house. That evening, gathered around the dining table with Mrs. Fletcher, Diego, and Hank, Charlotte and Sam announced their intention to marry. The news was met with congratulations that suggested none of the ranch hands were particularly surprised. "We've seen how you look at each other," Diego said with a grin, "even before you realized it yourselves." "Your father would approve," Mrs. Fletcher added, her eyes misting slightly. "He always hoped you'd find someone worthy of you, Charlotte." Later, as Sam prepared to return to the bunkhouse for the night, propriety demanded at least this concession until they were properly wed. Charlotte walked with him to the porch. "Tomorrow will be challenging," she said, glancing in the direction of Abilene. "Jenkins won't give up easily." Sam tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch lingering. "You'll handle him. You're stronger than he realizes." "It's easier to be strong when I'm not alone," Charlotte admitted. "You never will be again," Sam promised, pressing a kiss to her forehead before reluctantly stepping away. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we fight for our future." The next morning dawned clear and bright, a perfect Kansas spring day. Charlotte dressed with particular care, choosing her most businesslike dress, a navy blue ensemble with minimal frills that nonetheless emphasized her feminine figure. She wanted Jenkins to see her as both a woman and a formidable opponent. Sam and Diego had already departed for the North Ridge by the time Charlotte set out for town, riding her favorite mare. The journey gave her time to organize her thoughts, to prepare her arguments against Jenkins's pressure tactics. By the time Abilene came into view, she felt ready for the confrontation. The bank was an imposing brick building on Abilene's Main Street, its facade designed to project stability and permanence. Charlotte tied her horse at the hitching post out front and climbed the steps with deliberate confidence, the certified mineral claim documents secure in her reticule. Jenkins was in his office, conferring with two of the railroad men who had visited the ranch. All three looked up in surprise as Charlotte was shown in by the clerk. "Miss Sinclair," Jenkins recovered quickly, rising from his chair. "We were just discussing your situation. I'm pleased to see you've returned from your travels." "I'm sure you are," Charlotte replied coolly. She remained standing, declining the chair he offered with a small gesture. "I understand you've been making plans regarding my property in my absence." Jenkins exchanged glances with the railroad men. "Merely exploring options to resolve your financial difficulties, my dear." "Your father's debts are my concern, not yours," Charlotte interrupted. "And certainly not the railroad's." The taller of the two railroad men stepped forward. "Miss Sinclair, we're prepared to make this very simple for you. Our offer still stands 3 times the land's agricultural value. Enough to clear your debts and start fresh elsewhere, perhaps back east where life would be more suitable for a young woman alone." Charlotte smiled thinly. "I'm not alone, Mr. Harrison. Thomas Harrison, Vice President of the Missouri-Kansas Rail Corporation." "Well, Mr. Harrison, I am neither alone nor in need of your charity." Charlotte opened her reticule and withdrew the certified documents. "As of yesterday, the Sinclair Ranch is officially registered as holding valuable mineral rights, specifically, a significant coal deposit on the North Ridge." The shock on their faces was immensely satisfying. Jenkins recovered first, reaching for the papers. "Let me see those." Charlotte held them just out of his reach. "They're in perfect order, I assure you, properly filed and certified by the Federal Land Office in Kansas City." Harrison's face had darkened considerably. "You knew about the coal all along. You've been playing us for fools." "No, Mr. Harrison. My father discovered the deposit shortly before his death. I simply followed through on his plans to secure it legally." Charlotte turned back to Jenkins. "Now, about that bank note. I understand you've been threatening early foreclosure." Jenkins had gone slightly pale. "That was merely a procedural notice, Miss Sinclair. Standard practice when accounts are in arrears." "I see." And would it also be standard practice for a banker to collude with a railroad to force a property owner into distress sale without disclosing known mineral assets? Charlotte asked innocently. I wonder what the banking commission would think of such practices. The threat hung in the air between them. Jenkins swallowed visibly. Perhaps we could discuss refinancing options, he suggested, his tone markedly more conciliatory. The bank is always willing to work with valuable clients like yourself. I think that would be wise, Charlotte agreed. She finally took the offered seat, arranging her skirts with deliberate composure. And Mr. Harrison, when your company is ready to discuss legitimate access to the coal deposits on my land, you're welcome to submit a proper proposal, one that recognizes fair market value. Harrison's jaw tightened, but he gave a curt nod before excusing himself. His companion followed, leaving Charlotte alone with an increasingly accommodating Jenkins. By the time she rode out of Abilene an hour later, Charlotte had secured a 6-month extension on the banknote at a reduced interest rate. More importantly, she had established herself as a businesswoman to be taken seriously, not just a grieving daughter to be manipulated. The satisfaction carried her all the way back to the ranch, where she found Sam and Diego had returned from their inspection of the North Ridge. Everything secure, Sam reported as he helped her dismount. No sign of trespassing. How did it go with Jenkins? Charlotte couldn't suppress her smile. Let's just say he's suddenly become very interested in maintaining a positive relationship with the Sinclair Ranch. Sam's laugh was full of pride as he pulled her into an embrace, propriety forgotten in the moment of triumph. That's my girl. Your future wife, Charlotte corrected, returning his embrace without concern for who might be watching. They had earned this moment, this victory that secured not just the ranch's future but their own. In the weeks that followed, life at the Sinclair Ranch transformed. With the immediate financial pressure relieved, Charlotte and Sam focused on both running the current operations and planning expansions. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Abilene. Met with general approval, though Charlotte noted some of the young women in town regarded her with new interest, as if trying to determine what qualities had captured the attention of the handsome, reserved cowboy, who had been virtually invisible to society before. The railway company, after an initial period of sullen silence, eventually returned with a legitimate proposal for access to the coal deposits. The terms they offered were fair clearly. They had realized that bullying tactics would no longer work against the new mistress of Sinclair Ranch. One evening in late June, as Charlotte sat on the porch reviewing cattle breeding records, Sam joined her with 2 glasses of lemonade. The sunset painted the prairie in shades of gold and amber, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of wildflowers. I've been thinking, Sam said as he handed her a glass. We should set a date. Charlotte looked up from her papers. For the wedding, unless you've changed your mind. There was a hint of teasing in his voice, but Charlotte detected a trace of genuine uncertainty beneath it. She set aside her work and took his hand. I haven't changed my mind, Sam Tanner. Not about you, not about us. Relief flickered in his eyes. Good, because I've never been more certain of anything. Charlotte squeezed his fingers. August then, after the cattle auction in Topeka. That would give us time to prepare properly. Sam nodded, bringing her hand to his lips. August it is. As the weeks passed, preparations for both the cattle auction and the wedding proceeded in tandem. Charlotte ordered a wedding dress from Kansas City, simple but elegant, befitting a working ranch owner rather than a society belle. Sam, with Diego and Hank's help, began building an addition to the main house, a larger bedroom and private sitting room for the soon-to-be-married couple. In late July, just as they were preparing to drive the cattle to Topeka for the auction, Charlotte received an unexpected letter. It was from her mother's sister in Boston, responding to the news of John Sinclair's death and Charlotte's engagement that Mrs. Fletcher had written to share. "My aunt is coming for the wedding," Charlotte told Sam that evening as they sat at the kitchen table, going over final preparations for the cattle drive. "I haven't seen her since I was 12, when Father took me east for a visit. Will that be pleasant?" Sam asked cautiously, noting Charlotte's ambivalent expression. "Aunt Harriet never approved of Father taking me west," Charlotte explained. "She thought it unsuitable for a young lady of good family to be raised on a cattle ranch. I suspect she's coming to assess the situation and you rather than to celebrate with us." Sam's jaw tightened slightly. "I see." Charlotte reached across the table to touch his arm. "It doesn't matter what she thinks, Sam. This is our home, our life. I just wanted to warn you that she may be challenging." Sam covered her hand with his own. "I've faced worse than disapproving Boston aunts," he said with a small smile. "Besides, I have something on my side that your father didn't when he took your mother west." "What's that?" "Your mother was leaving her family behind. You're already home." The simple truth of it warmed Charlotte's heart. She was home more fully than she'd ever been, now that she and Sam were building a future together. The cattle drive to Topeka was successful beyond their expectations. Beef prices were at a record high due to increased demand from eastern cities, and the Sinclair herd was in prime condition. They returned with enough money to pay off the bank note entirely and still have capital for the ranch improvements they'd planned. As August arrived, bringing the wedding date closer, Charlotte found herself increasingly curious about the man she was about to marry. Despite their deepening relationship and physical affection that grew bolder with each passing day, though still within the bounds of propriety, there were aspects of Sam's life before the Sinclair Ranch that remained mysterious to her. One evening, as they walked along the creek that ran through the eastern pasture, Charlotte gathered her courage to ask about his family. "You never speak of them," she said gently. "Will any of your relatives attend the wedding?" Sam was silent for a long moment, his gaze on the water flowing past. "There's no one to invite," he finally said. "My parents died of fever when I was 16. My younger sister followed a few months later. That's when I enlisted in the Union Army. There was nothing left for me in Ohio." Charlotte's heart ached for the young boy he'd been, facing such loss alone. "I'm sorry," she said, taking his hand. "I shouldn't have pried." "No, you have every right to know." Sam squeezed her fingers. "We're building a life together. No secrets between us." "No secrets," Charlotte agreed, leaning into his side as they continued walking. "After the war, I wasn't sure what to do with myself," Sam continued after a while. "I drifted west with the cattle drives, working my way from town to town. I was good with horses, could handle myself in rough country, but I didn't have a purpose, a place that felt like home." He glanced down at her. "Until your father offered me that job." Charlotte understood now why the Sinclair Ranch meant so much to him, why he had stayed when other cowboys moved on, why he had been so quick to help her save it. Like her, he had found home here. "We'll build our own family," she promised softly. "Fill that big house with children someday." The smile that spread across Sam's face at her words made her heart skip. "I'd like that very much," he said, pulling her close for a kiss that promised the future they both longed for. Aunt Harriet arrived from Boston 3 days before the wedding, bringing with her trunks of city finery and a barely concealed skepticism about Charlotte's chosen life. The older woman inspected the ranch house with a critical eye, made polite but cool observations about the rustic charm of Abilene, and regarded Sam with the assessing gaze of one evaluating horseflesh at auction. To his credit, Sam met her scrutiny with unfailing courtesy and quiet confidence. He answered her probing questions about his background honestly, neither apologizing for his lack of formal education nor downplaying his knowledge of ranching and business. On the evening before the wedding, as Charlotte and her aunt sat on the porch watching Sam work with a young horse in the corral, Harriet finally spoke her mind. "He's not what I expected," the older woman admitted. "When your housekeeper wrote that you were marrying a cowboy, I imagined someone rather more rough." Charlotte smiled, watching Sam's gentle but firm handling of the spirited colt. "Sam is many things, Aunt Harriet, but never rough, except perhaps with those who threaten what he cares about." Her aunt studied her face for a moment. "You love him very much, don't you?" "More than I thought possible a few months ago," Charlotte replied honestly. "And the ranch? You truly wish to remain here, running cattle and living this frontier life when you could return east to civilization?" Charlotte turned to face her aunt directly. "This is my civilization, Aunt Harriet, my home. The ranch is my heritage from Father, and now it's the future Sam and I are building together." Harriet was silent for a long moment, her gaze returning to Sam in the corral. Finally, she sighed. "Your mother would have understood, I think. She always did have an adventurous spirit beneath her proper Boston upbringing." She reached over to pat Charlotte's hand. "Be happy, my dear. That's all any of us can truly hope for in this life." The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, as if the Kansas sky itself approved of the union. The ceremony was held on the ranch, beneath the large oak tree where Charlotte's mother was buried. Reverend Wilson from the Abilene Church officiated with Mrs. Fletcher, Diego, Hank, Aunt Harriet, and a surprising number of townspeople and neighboring ranchers in attendance. Charlotte wore her new dress of ivory satin, simple yet elegant with her mother's lace veil. Sam, in a new suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and tall frame, watched her approach with an expression of such tender reverence that tears sprang to her eyes. The vows they exchanged were traditional in wording but profound in meaning for both. When Sam placed the gold band on Charlotte's finger, a band he had secretly commissioned in Topeka, engraved with their initials and the date, his hands were steady, his voice clear and certain. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Wilson declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." As Sam kissed her, sealing their union before friends and community, Charlotte felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This man who had stepped onto that stagecoach and changed her life with a single word was now her husband, her partner, her future. The celebration continued well into the evening, with tables set up in the yard, lanterns hanging from trees, and Diego's cousin providing lively fiddle music for dancing. Charlotte danced with her new husband, with neighboring ranchers, even with a surprisingly spry Aunt Harriet, while Sam twirled Mrs. Fletcher around the makeshift dance floor with unexpected grace. As twilight deepened into night, the newlyweds slipped away from the celebration to their house now, with the new addition Sam had completed just days earlier. There, in the privacy of their bedroom, they discovered each other fully for the first time, their passion tempered with tenderness, their desire with deep respect. Afterward, as Charlotte lay in Sam's arms, she thought of how differently her life might have unfolded if she had stayed on that stagecoach 2 months ago, if she had fled her responsibilities and her grief, seeking refuge with distant relatives who barely knew her. "What are you thinking about?" Sam murmured, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "About choices," Charlotte replied. "About how a single decision can change everything." "Regrets?" he asked softly. Charlotte raised herself on one elbow to look into his face, illuminated by moonlight streaming through the window. Not one, she said with absolute certainty. Staying was the best choice I ever made. Sam pulled her close again, his kiss a promise of all the days and nights to come. For both of us, he whispered against her lips. 5 years later, Charlotte stood on the porch of the expanded Sinclair Ranch house, watching Sam teaching their 3-year-old son John to ride his first pony. Their 1-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, slept in her arms, a warm weight against Charlotte's chest. In the distance, the new barn and expanded corrals testified to the ranch's prosperity, while smoke rose from the small mining operation on the North Ridge, where the railway company extracted coal under a profit-sharing agreement that had made the Sinclair Ranch one of the wealthiest properties in the county. Diego, now their official horse trainer, called advice to little John, who sat proudly atop the patient Shetland pony. Mrs. Fletcher, officially retired but still very much the heart of the household, was baking pies in the kitchen for the ranch hands' supper. Life was full, rich, and more satisfying than Charlotte could have imagined on that tearful day when grief had nearly driven her away from Abilene forever. As if sensing her thoughts, Sam looked up from his position beside the pony and caught her eye across the yard. His smile, still capable of making her heart skip after 5 years of marriage, was filled with the same steady love that had sustained them through both challenges and triumphs. Building the ranch, expanding their operations, welcoming their children into the world, they had done it all as true partners, their strengths complementing each other perfectly. Charlotte smiled back, adjusting sleeping Elizabeth in her arms. From desperate tears on a departing stagecoach to this moment of contentment, her journey had been unexpected but perfect in its outcome. All because a determined cowboy had climbed aboard and said that single word that changed everything: stay.